Thanks everyone for joining. Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are. I see there's people from all over the world, so it's great to see that. So today we're going to go over, as usual, some of the updates on what happened in the Trino project in the last few months. We do these presentations at every summit, so we like to let you guys know, let everyone know where have we been up to, all the new improvements that we've had in the last few months, especially since Trino Fest when we made the last update, and talk a bit about some of the things that are coming up soon. My name is Martin Traverso. I'm one of the founders of Trino and CTO and co-founder at Traverso. All right, so we continue to see a lot of momentum in the project. The project continues to accelerate in the amount of contributions, the number of people that get involved. In the last year or so, we kept the pace of about one release every couple of weeks, 1 to 2 weeks. That's what we target. Sometimes it's a bit longer, sometimes a bit less, depending on how much activity, how many changes we have to release every time. So we're going to be doing a release in the next day or so. It has a bunch of new features too, so be on the lookout for that. We had a lot of new commits, new activity. We have almost 700 contributors since the project started, and we have a very, very large community of more than 11,000 people in Slack. So if you are a Trino user and you're not on Slack, that's the place you want to be. That's where you'll see all the discussions, everything from people that need help to run Trino, configure it, how to use it, or they want to contribute and they want to see where to contribute, what if there are anything they can work on, or get help in getting familiarized with the code base and so on. So please join us on Slack if you're not there. That's where you'll meet everyone in the community. Right, let's cover what happened in the project since we started, since we gave the last update in around June for Trino Fest. There's some big new feature. We're going to talk a bit about it later. It's support for SQL routines. This is the ability to run, to define and run user-defined functions, and we're going to cover that in a little more detail later. We started this project called Project Hummingbird some time ago. It's a collection of a number of performance improvements, some like surface level improvements, but also a lot of architectural deeper improvements that we've been working on. And in the last few months, we made some changes that made a certain class of queries a lot faster. In particular, for aggregation queries, we've seen improvements in the order of 10 to 20% CPU reduction. So that's a pretty massive. It's been a pretty large effort, and we're only scratching the surface here. So we're going to continue working on that. We have also been making a number of improvements to the SQL language, in particular in response to the new SQL specification that came out in this year in 2023 that introduces a number of usability features. For example, especially if you're familiar with other programming languages where you're dealing with numbers and hexadecimal numbers and so on, different representations. Now you can define numbers, or you can write numbers in your queries in the same way you would do in any other language. There's also a way to improve the usability of numbers that have a lot of digits, where you can add underscores to separate them into thousands or millions and so on. So if you're familiar with other languages and you come to expect that in any programming language, that's already in SQL, and we've already added that to Trino. We've added other features. This is just a small set of features, a short list of features, but we have a lot more that you can check in the release notes. We have support for the filter clause in list tag aggregation function that was missing. It was a new list tag was added recently or in the last few months, but we didn't have that support for filter, which is a super convenient way of filtering data sets before you process them with list tag. And then on the security front, we have a new command called set session authorization, which allows you to change the user the queries are going to be running as once you are already interacting with Trino. And this can be useful in cases where you need to, for example, let's say you have a high privilege user and you don't want to be interacting with Trino with the permissions of that high privilege user because you may be an admin, for instance. You may be performing actions that are potentially sensitive or they might be destructive if you're not careful. And with this command, you can drop your permissions to some user that has limited permissions, and then you can interact with Trino in a safe manner. And then we added a bunch of features to manage tables, manage the schema of tables. In particular, we added the ability to define columns of complex types, like with nested fields, and the ability to change their types, add them, drop them, etc. And this is to be able to support systems like Delta Lake and Iceberg that support this type of schemas, and people have become accustomed to relying on them. Specifically on the object storage connectors, this is Delta Lake and Hive and Iceberg and so on. We have seen a lot of investment in the last few months. These connectors, so Iceberg, Delta Lake, Hive to a lesser extent these days, and then Hootie are the connectors that people are paying the most attention to in the recent times. And we've seen a lot of improvements in those connectors in terms of performance, and we're going to talk a bit about that in a moment. Also supporting a lot of specific features of each of those formats. For example, Delta Lake has some specific features like deletion vectors, so we've made improvements in Trino to support those, and so on. And then, of course, like allowing all the SQL commands to interact properly with those connectors, like the ability to drop tables, and we'll see the ability to drop with Cascade or truncate tables or other ways of manipulating tables. We've added support for all those commands to these connectors. So in terms of performance, we've done a lot of work on the Parquet readers and writers. We have a new optimized Parquet reader. It has been in the code base for a while, but it is finally the default. Is the one that runs out of the box now, and the only implementation that we support now. So it's much faster than the old one. We made improvements to the Avro reader and writers, and those are much faster these days. And then tons and tons of improvements for org, Parquet, text and JSON data formats. We made improvements in the readers and writers. So if you are on an older version, you might want to upgrade to recent versions to take advantage of those performance improvements. The other thing we've done, of course, is continued work to support the evolving data formats like Delta Lake and Iceberg. We added support for Databricks 13.3. We added support for deletion vectors in Delta Lake. We support the new writer version 7 and so on. So there's all these little things that make it possible for Trino to interact with Delta Lake and with Iceberg as those systems continue to evolve. So that's an ongoing effort, and we'll continue to work on those things. To give an example of some of the things that you'll be able to do, or you can do these days with those connectors and specifically the language features we added to support them. We have this new function called register table. It's a function that allows you to, if you're trying to integrate with tables that have, for example, they have the iceberg format, and you need to register them in a Metastore, but you want to if you want to do it easily without having to go and import all that data into a new table, you can just register that table through this function. So these are some convenience functions that allow you to migrate from one system to another. If you have a Hive table and you need to register it in a Metastore or Iceberg Metastore and so on. So this is just a set of convenience utilities, and you can see more in the documentation release notes that allow you to migrate, manage, interact with your existing systems. We've added specifically for the Delta Lake connector a special table called $properties that's associated with every table that can give you more metadata about these tables that is not visible anywhere else. So you can introspect what the internal properties of those tables by querying that special table. We added support for a command called create or replace, which allows you to atomically swap a table. So if you have a table in Iceberg and you want to atomically swap it, then you can use this command. This is, of course, useful if you have a big data lake and you're trying to, you have big transformation process and you want to atomically swap data without data being unavailable for the duration of the operation, then you can use this command. I believe that's supported for Iceberg right now, and there's changes in progress to support it for other connectors. We also have support for drop with the Cascade modifier. So if you have references to other objects that will delete recursively, you can truncate tables. This is a quick operation, so you don't have to. If you have a connector like Delta Lake or Iceberg, the truncate operation is much faster than doing a delete, and which requires compaction under the covers. And of course, the ability to drop columns and manipulate columns is something we've been adding to different connectors. So that was for the object storage connectors, Delta Lake, Iceberg, Hive, and so on. We made a number of other changes to the long tail of connectors that we have in Trino. In particular, we added support for update to a number of connectors, especially all the JDBC-based connectors. We have, for the BigQuery connector, we now support deletes. For Google Sheets, you can now insert into a Google Sheets table. We have support for renaming columns in a number of connectors like MongoDB and so on. And then, as I said before, the ability to do cascade deletes is cascade drops in the object store connectors and a number of other connectors as well. All right, let's talk about the big feature that we added in the last few months. So this is something that has been a long journey. If you look at how Trino used to work way back in the day. So functions in Trino were defined statically. They were written in Java, and they had to be they were loaded when the server started. So any function that wasn't available when the server started was you can use it. You would need to write code, compile it, build a rebuild Trino, or build a connect or a plugin that provided a function and redeploy your whole cluster. Of course, obviously that's not a good user experience. So we've been thinking about, okay, how we improve that. The first thing we did was we added the ability for connectors and plugins to resolve functions dynamically. That made it possible to treat functions in the same way we treat tables. So a function doesn't necessarily need to exist at the time the server starts. It can be defined later. A connector can, or a plugin can define a function later and then present it to the engine when at the moment it's being used. So that introduces more flexibility and the ability to define functions at a later time. And so the next step after that, this is what we accomplished in the last few months, is the ability to define functions as a user without having to write any Java code. And you do that by defining a function. We have some syntax I'll show in a moment, but this is you use a dialect of SQL that is used for defining procedures, and then you can register the functions in the system like you register any table, or you can use them inline in your query. I'll give you an example of that in just a few moments. And this just opens the door, it paves the road for what things we want to do in the future. Like eventually we want to get to a point where we can define functions in other languages, not just the SQL dialect. Like for example, we might have functions in JavaScript or Python or any other language that is commonly used by data engineers, data scientists, and analysts. So it will make it easier for people that are used to other systems, or people that have functions implemented in other systems, to port them over and use them directly inside Trino. So that's for the future, though. So to give you a couple of examples here, if you see here, there's an example of how you define a function. There's a keyword function. You define the name of the function, the arguments, the return type, and then some body that describes what the function is doing. So you'll see this language is very simple. It's very it's a little verbose, and especially if you're used to other languages like C or Python or Java, it's a little more verbose than those, but it's very easy to understand. And it's actually defined by a SQL standard, so we just implemented what the SQL standard described. So there are two ways to define functions in Trino. You can either have inline functions. As you can see, this is a function that's specified in the with clause, and that applies to the select at the bottom. So you can, in your query, define a function that is going to be visible only to that query, and then you can invoke it. So, and this is useful if you're trying to create a function and iterate on it. Before you make it available to everyone else, you can iterate, you can change things, and you can run it and try it out in a query inline. And then at some point, if you want to make it published for other people to use, you can then use the create function command. You can create a function, you can register it, and then any user later can refer to that function. The function will be invoked, resolved and invoked like any other function in the system. And then you can see the functions that you define by calling the show functions command, or you can even you can drop it later if you need to throw it away or recreate it. You can use the drop function command. So the inline functions are again useful for iterating, debugging, etc. And then eventually you can make it make them available to other people in your organization, or even just as a way to build a library of functions that are generally useful that you want to be able to use across multiple queries. So functions allow you to, so the ability to define functions gives you, like it improved the ability to modularize queries. Like before we had this, sometimes you had to repeat the same structures over and over again in the same query or across multiple queries. You have to keep track of, if you make changes in one place, you have to make changes everywhere else. Or people would have to do things out of band, like have template generators that would inject the implementation of a function in a query before the query gets submitted. So this is so kind of very cumbersome. So with this new facility, you can now start abstracting the logic of your query in a much more manageable way, just like you would do in any other programming language. All right, then there's another feature that we've been working on for a while, and it has been around for a while, but we haven't talked much about it. It's still experimental, so I would not recommend it for production use, but definitely try it out if it's if something that's interesting to you, and provide feedback. So the idea is, right now, or up until some time ago, you had to, in order to define new catalogs, you had to define them statically before the server starts. You had to provide a configuration file, and then the server starts up, registers the catalog, and then you can use it. If you need to make changes to the catalog, or if you need to create a new catalog, you had to stop the server, create a new one, or modify it and restart the catalog. We had a lot of requests over the last, actually, for the last many years, from people that they've been wanting to be able to define catalogs dynamically. So you have especially for people that are running a cluster and offering a service to a larger organization, they don't want to be shutting down the cluster every time someone says, "Oh, I need a new connector, a new connection to a new data source." They need to be able to manage that more effectively and without creating downtime. So basically, we're asking, well, how do we create catalogs dynamically? So we added this feature that allows you to define a catalog at runtime, and you can manipulate the catalogs in the same way you manipulate tables. You can create a catalog with some configuration, then you can use it, and then you can drop it if you want to, or you can recreate it, and so on. So the feature works. I think it's limited to some connectors only right now because of some implementation issues with some connectors that don't handle this properly. But it's mostly functional. There are some things missing though that you have to be aware of. There's no management of secrets or sensitive configurations. So if your configuration requires some sensitive data like passwords and so on, then those will be potentially accessible. So you have to be careful with what's in the configuration for those connectors. There's some commands are not present yet, like show create catalog. So those are things we still need to work on. I think there are some questions around, well, how does this fit in the different deployment models? Like once you deploy a cluster, then what happens with catalogs that you create? What happens when the cluster, if you recreate a cluster, how do you recreate all those catalogs if you want to? So there's a number of open questions that we still need to figure out, and we're looking for feedback. If this feature is useful to you, like give it a try, and give us feedback on what works, what doesn't work, and what are the things you would like to see, and then we'll keep working on this. All right, on the larger ecosystem, we have a number of improvements on the Helm chart. We have a group of people having taken the baton on that project, and they've made a bunch of improvements to the Helm chart implementation. We've done a few releases. So if you're using Kubernetes and Helm, give that a try. It's now fully supported, and of course it has a number of improvements. May still be missing things, so provide feedback, use it, and so on. For anyone that's following release notes, one of the things that people have been asking for is the ability to tell when we're making changes that might break compatibility. That could be configuration, changes that require configuration, modifying configuration, or changes that may affect how the users interact with the system. It could be backwards incompatible changes at the language level, and so on. So now we highlight in the release notes each change that might break compatibility. So this is now a lot more visible, so you can just scan through the release notes and see, okay, this may be something I need to pay attention to before I upgrade to this new version. So previously was you kind of had to read between the lines and figure out that something might be causing problems if you upgrade. So anyway, that's something that people have asked for. We started tracking that and exposing that in release notes. And then we have a couple new projects. Well, there's a TypeScript client library. It's a third party implemented that from the community. We have a new project. It's actually based on the gateway project that the team at Lyft implemented a while ago, and they haven't been maintaining it, and so a bunch of people got together and decided to start supporting that. So we create a new project for that, and it's a first class project now in the Trino ecosystem. I'm not going to talk about that too much. I don't want to steal thunder from the people who are going to be presenting that. So, but there will be a talk later that goes into a little more detail about that. All right, in terms of what's coming up in roadmap, what's coming up soon. So Snowflake Connector, we've been working on that for a while. A number of people have been working together on trying to push that over the the finish line. It's very, very close to shipping now. So I expect it will be in Trino in the next few weeks. So we're all pushing hard to make that happen. We have integrations with Alexio ongoing. There's some pull requests that are still in progress, but that's going to be also wrapping up pretty soon. So expect to see that in the next few releases. We talked about a few months ago. We talked about JSON table. We made a bunch of improvements for JSON handling in Trino, and JSON table was kind of the one thing that was missing from that set of features. So we've been working on that. That's actually very, very close to landing. So probably by the next release, it will be there. So this is a special table function. It's defined by the SQL specification. It's super powerful when you're dealing with JSON data, especially if you need to extract things out of highly nested JSON data and do that efficiently. So we'll have documentation on that, but if just be aware, if you're dealing with JSON data, this could be very powerful and very useful. We continue to make improvements for Hummingbird. Like I said, we made some improvements in the last few months, and we're just scratching the surface, and we have a lot more changes planned, and we'll be rolling them out in the next few months as well. And then we always focus on making the developer experience better. One of the things that sometimes is a bit problematic is how you testing, how we test changes. The more over time we end up accumulating a lot of tests, and when they're running the CI, they run slow. They take a long time to run the CI, so the feedback cycles are kind of slow. So we're trying to figure out better ways of improving that, so that the developer experience, especially for people who are contributing changes, and they want to see, well, does the change break anything? We want to make that a better experience and get faster feedback to improve the velocity. So those are ongoing efforts that we're going to be will be continue to do over the next few months. Right, and finally, the one thing I wanted to talk about is that we are moving to Java 21. So Trino supports Java 21. This has been a long process of getting dependencies updated, getting the build infrastructure updated to be able to run with Java 21 and compatible with that runtime. So Trino can now run with Java 21, and we are shipping that in the Docker container. So if you've been using one of the recent versions of Docker, of the Docker container, you're already running with Java 21. Java 17 is still supported. In case there are problems, you can always fall back and to Java 17 and run with that older version of the JDK. But we're trying to get to Java 21. We expect that in the next month or so, we're going to do the switch. We are pretty much ready to do that. So at that point, Trino will require Java 21 to run. And then we will be able to start developing and building and targeting Java 21 language features. So we're asking for everyone that's running Trino, if you get a chance, try running Trino with Java 21 for your workloads and report if you have any issues, be it performance regressions, crashes, etc. We want to know. We want to build more confidence in that the update to Java 21 is going to be smooth and safe. Some of the reasons, of course, Java keeps evolving. They do releases every half a year. There's also a lot of momentum in that project. They've been picking up the pace in developing features, and we're going to take advantage of those. There's language features. Once we switch to developing with Java 21, there's a lot of language features that will make it easier to write more maintainable and readable code. And of course, that improves the developer experience, improves the experience of someone jumping into the code base for the first time. So we want to take advantage of all those things. Then there are improvements in the runtime itself, like garbage collection, JIT compiler, that we can take advantage of and of course, if you're running just the VM, you can take advantage of those, but we want to keep up with the times there. And then there are a number of features that, or I guess capabilities in the JDK that will make it easier to, or make it possible to write better, more performant code using facilities such as virtual threads, some of the new concurrent programming constructs, and so on, or vector API and so on. So we can take more advantage of the power of the underlying CPU architecture and so on. So this is happening, so please try it out, give us feedback. All right, and to close out, we have, of course, lots of community events, community activities, and things that happen. So if you want to keep up with what's going on, we have a page on the Trino site with a calendar of upcoming events and meetups. We had a number of events in the last few months in India, Japan, South Korea, in the USA. Basically, Trino is everywhere these days. If you want to host a meetup or an event, please do so. If you want help, we have people here that can help you organize that. So by all means. We have the Trino community broadcast. If you haven't seen that, it's a show. Cole and Manfred run the show, and they talk about anything and everything that's going around Trino. They have episodes where they talk to developers and talk about specific deep dives on specific topics, features, etc. They talk to users and go into use cases and how people are using Trino and so on. So look at it. If you have something that's you think is interesting to talk about in the Trino community broadcast, reach out to Manfred or Cole, and they'll set you up. And then we have some resources. We have a new page that talks about the whole ecosystem of tools that support Trino or can run with Trino. So you can follow that link and see that. It's on the website. We recently redid the SQL training series. So if you want to learn a bit about the beginner, all the way from beginner to more advanced SQL features that Trino supports, you can go watch those series. And I expect we'll be doing more of those for even more advanced features that we uncovered. And then one last announcement. We're planning. We don't have a concrete date yet, but we're planning a contributor congregation early next year. This is a meetup, a forum type thing for anyone that is interested in developing and contributing to Trino. We're going to talk about kind of more technical deep dives into different technical topics. So be on the lookout for that. And if you're interested, you can always join that. And with that, I'm going to finish and open up to questions.
Thank you, Martin. That was amazing. So much going on, and the excitement in the chat is also clearly visible. People are asking about dynamic catalogs and SQL routines, and also like the incoming Snowflake connector and Alexio and all that kind of stuff. So I just want to point out that a lot of this stuff is covered in the documentation and in the training material, the SQL training that Martin just mentioned. And so feel free to reuse those resources. There's blog posts on the Trino blog, and that point to the YouTube videos, and the YouTube videos have timestamps and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot to learn from there. And then with regards to Java 21, I did post the issue number into the Slack. If people do have feedback, and we very much want to hear from you, because this is going to unlock a lot of cool development for us, but we don't want to mess people up with, really can't use Java 21. But need the new features. We'll want to make sure any issues are resolved, and so far 21 runs like really, really well from all I can tell. So I linked to the issue, and you can just ping us in the /dev Slack channel, which is basically where a lot of things can be discussed and so on. So Martin, myself, Cole, everyone is always on Slack, so that's cool. Let's see what other questions came up. Well, what else was there to mention? But yeah, on the clients, I wanted to mention the TypeScript client is used in a Visual Code integration, for example. So you can, like add a Visual Studio Code, like the open source editor, and like run Trino queries in it, which is kind of interesting. There's also an integration for Emacs that we found out about, and there's a whole bunch of other integrations. And like, for example, our sponsor Coginity was a guest in the Trino community broadcast, so you can see that tool online and so on. So it's always great to chat with everyone from the community, and like find out who is using Trino, and we want to share that on the website, and so that's really awesome. Aksha is also asking about the Hive Hadoop dependencies and how they're going to be removed in Java 21, or what's happening there, Martin. I think that might be worth just quickly chatting about.
Yeah, we're actually removing all the dependencies on Hive Hadoop codebase. We re-implemented basically anything that requires Trino to talk to the Metastore, to HDFS, etc. We re-implemented all the all those pieces. So this native, or I guess dedicated implementation of all those components for Trino, so we don't have dependencies on those libraries anymore.
Yeah, and those replacements also are really cool because a lot of them improve performance a lot. Obviously, they're running on Java 17 or 21, running much faster. And also in the dynamic catalogs implementation, we also found that those dependencies leak like memory and have a whole lot of headaches. So by killing them out of Trino, we are basically getting a whole bunch of improvements all at once. But it was a lot of work, and props to David and others that worked a lot on that. There was a lot of lifting going on there.
So there's a question there on from Manish on whether there are plans to add indexing features like secondary indexes. We don't have any current plans on that. I mean, in general, those are limited by whether the data formats like table formats, Iceberg, Delta Lake, etc. support those. There's no out-of-band indexing in Trino, so it would need to be something that's natively supported by those formats, and then Trino could take advantage of it, and of course generate those indexes if necessary. But until that's defined in those table format standards, I probably won't have much. So.
Yeah. That's always one of the problems. There was also a question that came up about case insensitivity and stuff like that. One advantage of Trino is that it can access all these different data sources, but that also brings a lot of complexity with it, right? So some support case sensitive things, others don't, and Trino has to sometimes just make a choice, but that's really cool.
Yeah. Case sensitive is a long-standing problem. We have some thoughts on how to manage that, but we just haven't had the time to really sit down. It touches everything, so it's a very complicated topic. But we have some ideas on how to tackle that in long term. There are some workarounds today. Like there are ways for some connectors to where you can map tables, and especially there are conflicts between case-sensitive names. But a general solution, we're still working on that.
Cool. Well, that was it. Everyone has joined over the next session, and that's live now. So thanks, Martin.
All right. Thanks, everyone.